Hi, my name is Stephen Hall, and I want to talk about making Regina 100% renewable by 2050. I'm going to be sharing a little bit of an experience that my family has had over the last 4 years with solar, and also just extrapolate a little bit forward into the future. So the story begins summer of 2014. This is my family. This is my backyard. On the right, the young girl there is my eldest daughter, and in 2014 she turned 8. And the age of 8 was kind of an important age for me because that's the age that I was when my father passed away. And so I had a really clear memory of what being 8 was like. And so in the summer of 2014, I spent a lot of time thinking about that and thinking about what it was like to be 8, what it was like to be a father, what kind of responsibilities I had, and so on. Then I turned it around and I sort of thought, okay, well, I know what my life was like when I was 8. But I wonder what Amelia's life will be like when she's my age. And really the question I was asking myself is, what will life be like in 2059? Because in 2059, she'll be 53, and that's the age I was at the time this photograph was taken. And I have to say, when I had that thought, I really didn't like the image that came to mind. And it made me feel actually that maybe I wasn't doing, and my wife and I weren't doing enough to protect our children's future. And then I noticed this. This is the roof of my garage, and it faces southwest, and it gets a heck of a lot of sunshine. And so it led me on a path to begin investigating the solar potential in Saskatchewan. And I discovered this. I discovered that, in fact, in southern Saskatchewan especially, and in Regina in particular, we get the best PV potential in Canada. So we have the greatest potential to create electricity right here in Regina. So with this, and I did a bit more research that convinced my wife and I that this was the right decision to make. And so on December 12th, 2014, we proceeded with the installation. This was panel day, so some work had been done prior to this day, putting the racking up and so on. But this was the day where Sound Solar, the solar company that we had installing our system, did the work. And you'll see there's a lot of people working. In fact, for our system, it translated to 3.25 person days of work for every kilowatt of installed solar. And in fact, I did a back of the envelope calculation on this, and determined that in Regina, for every 1% of penetration into the solar market, it would translate into about 65 person years of jobs. So there's a lot of installation jobs associated with solar. So just looking at the numbers in an apples to apples comparison, before we had solar, on average, we paid about $186 a month for electricity. Now, that's kind of a high number because we have a largish house, and we also have a rental suite in our basement, which is included, and the garage. And I have a bit of a studio back there, so I tend to use quite a bit of electricity. So that's kind of a high number. But with solar, we've actually been able to reduce that total cost for electricity. This number, 173, includes the capital cost repayment for our panels, and all of the other costs associated with having electricity. So it really is an apples to apples comparison. Except here's the thing. Since I originally did this calculation, the cost of electricity has gone up. And so in fact, we're saving even more. And in fact, the cost of electricity will continue to go up. And as it does, that difference between what we would have paid if we'd continued to not have solar versus what we are paying for solar will continue to spread. So I want to talk a little bit about the intermittency of solar. This is obviously an issue. The sun is not always shining. We get a lot of it in Saskatchewan and in Regina, but it's not always shining. You'll see here these two graphs. The red graph shows consumption, that's energy being used, and the orange shows production. That's the energy being created by our solar system. And obviously, this is a perfectly sunny day. And obviously, there's an issue because we're not covering off all of our needs all the time. It's intermittent. And some people get really fixed on this, and they sort of get a bit cynical and say, well, there's the issue right there. The sun's not always shining, so you're not able to have electricity when you need it. And to those people, I ask this question: do you have running water in your house? And if they say yes, I'm amazed. That's amazing. Even when it's not raining, we figured out how to store water so that it's there when we need it. And we're doing the same with electricity. Now, this particular installation is in southern Australia. It happens to be the largest battery setup in the world. It's connected to an intermittent supply provided by those wind turbines. But actually, we have one right here in Regina, just to the east of the city. The Cowessess First Nation has this fantastic new setup, excuse me, where they have batteries, and those batteries are connected to a wind turbine and a brand new solar array. And they're really showing us how this will work in the future. And I do want to talk about the future for just a moment, because I sort of see it unfolding in a way that seems to make a lot of sense to me. And I'm going to begin with a view. This is a Google Maps view of my house. You see my house sort of in the middle there. Below it is my garage with the solar panels on it. I'm going to put an S on that just so that it's clear. And so that's us right now. Within the next 2 years, it's entirely possible that we'll add a battery backup system in our house. The reason for that is the cost of that battery system is coming down. And we're not quite sure where Sask Power's pricing policies will go, but it's entirely possible that a battery will actually make economic sense for us. Our next door neighbor's kind of a car guy, and it's entirely possible that he'll buy a battery EV in the next little while. Maybe not a Tesla, maybe it'll be a Nissan Leaf or a Chevy Bolt. But it's interesting. In the last 2 years, 4 of my friends have purchased battery EVs. The latest one was a Tesla, lucky guy. But that's just in my circle of friends. 4 people have battery-operated vehicles. So I don't think this level of density is unreasonable. Zooming a little bit out from my neighborhood within the next 5 years, I think maybe the density might increase to that, where we have solar panels and batteries either in houses or in cars. I don't think that's an unreasonable density. Interestingly, last week when I went to the Cowessess First Nation for that tour, I came home and boom, right there, solar panels had been added to that house. It literally happened in that afternoon. I hadn't noticed the racking and came home and there were solar panels on that roof. So again, I don't think this is an unreasonable projection of the kind of density that we'd see in terms of the penetration of solar and batteries in that area of the community. If we zoom out a bit further, this now is the southern part of Regina. And again, we sort of anticipate density of something like that within the next 10 years. I actually think this is a pretty conservative estimate. I think we'll probably see more solar and more batteries either in houses or in battery electric vehicles. But I think this is a reasonable level of projection. And here's the thing. At this point, I want to sort of stop and say, okay, imagine that this is 1995 and that these nodes that we're looking at, these nodes of either solar or battery, let's say those nodes are actually personal computers. So in 1995, people had been buying, personal computers and using them for desktop publishing and word processing and so on. But around 1995, this happened. The internet happened. Okay, all those computers got connected to each other and to the rest of the world. And arguably, there were some big nodes in that. Google obviously is a big node. Amazon's a big node right now. But really, the power of the internet isn't because of those big nodes or isn't because of one big node that we're all sort of spoken hub connected to. The internet is powerful because it's an interconnected network of modestly powered nodes. That's what's made it so powerful. Little computers and laptops and cell phones and bigger computers that are sending packets of information up and bringing packets of information down. But it's all connected. And so if we go back now to solar panels and batteries and sort of imagine again, this happening within the next 10 years, I call this the Internet of Energy. where we're all connected to each other, and we're either producing power and sending it over to our neighbors, or maybe we're storing power for use later on that we can draw at a different time. But the idea is that we're all connected. There's an example of this down in New York. It's a test site. It's called the Brooklyn Microgrid. I encourage you to Google that and find out more about it. The Brooklyn Microgrid reimagines the traditional energy grid model with the concept of a communal energy network. And I really believe this is the future. It'll provide a grid over the next 30 years that looks something like this. It's an interconnected network of modestly powered nodes, maybe in the form of connected microgrids. There'll certainly be bigger nodes in this. Hopefully SAS Power will be participating with big solar farms that are in different locations, wind farms and so on. But I really believe that this form of the grid, a distributed grid, will provide us the opportunity to participate in creating clean energy for our future and for our children. And also it'll provide a more resilient grid, and it'll provide jobs. I want to end on this image that I took at the Cowessess First Nation. This is Anton Farber from the Saskatchewan Research Council. He's there with a number of students from Lakeview School. And I love this image. It shows the Cowessess First Nation solar panels kind of going off into the distance there. And I really do believe it represents the future. And I love what Cowessess is doing. It's really inspirational stuff. And I do want to just end with this final quote from Paul Allen, who's a co-founder of Microsoft and passed away just yesterday. He said, "As long as we work together with both urgency and determination, there are no limits to what we can achieve." And I believe this. I really believe that making Regina 100% renewable by 2050 is possible. We just need to embrace that challenge with urgency and determination, and I encourage you to participate in that.